going as quickly as possible. Hey, we're live and welcome to Talking Niagara. And hey, those dreaded updates. Hey, horrible, eh?
Yeah, I'd forgotten that I updated it yesterday. There was an update yesterday, and after the update finished, I just turned it off.
Yeah.
But I forgot that the next time you turn it on, it takes like forever to kick in.
Yep.
And it took over 10 minutes to get where I am now.
Yeah, I get you. Yeah.
And you get that little wheel going round and round and round.
You know, the best thing to actually do is when you get those updates, turn it off and turn it on again immediately. Right? Go through the horrors, then you're okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I didn't make it.
Yeah, I know. We've all been there. Don't worry about it. Okay, so World Human Rights Watch basically talking about Burkina Faso's disastrous year of 2023. We talked about this during last year as well, didn't we? Because they've had kind of deadly attacks by insurgent Islamic groups, civilians and military forces, pro and anti-government militias committing abuses, and all during this counterinsurgency operations as well. Right? So not exactly a nice place to be right now.
The reason why I bring it up is because it's one of the forgotten places. It is even more forgotten than Sudan and Mali right now. And I'm going to bring up Mali and Sudan a little later on in the week, because we as world citizens basically have to be made aware of what's going on in the world. And unfortunately for our news agencies, they just kind of pick up on what the highlights are. They'll do Gaza, they'll do Ukraine, and they'll even censor that. Basically, we don't get the whole story there because you don't hear anything about APEC in the news usually, or something like that. But in this particular case, the people of Burkina Faso have really had a long difficulty. There are Islamic groups there fighting, one Al Qaeda based and one ISIS based, and the government of Burkina Faso has they did a coup, I think last year or the year before.
Yeah, basically it collapsed in October 22, and there was a military coup with back in October 22. I think that's when we talked about it last time.
Yes, and unfortunately for the people of Burkina Faso, they unfortunately these Islamic insurgents are coming up, and the government decided to kick the French out, which were the stabilizers there. The French have been there for 20 years, helping them fight Islamic insurgency. The coup, those who performed the coup, the military coup, dumped the French and brought in instead Russian and Turkish forces to help sort of stabilize the situation. But the problem is the insurgents are particularly cruel, and the government backlash is particularly cruel. So you'll get insurgents coming in dressed like on motorcycles, just like army guys, and then just lay waste to a village. They'll shoot it up. They'll kill. In one of the latest ones, they killed 17 men just for the heck of it, and so they are incredibly brutal, cruel. But the reaction of the government is equally cruel. That leaves the average person in a point where they're homeless. They have to keep moving on, and there is food insecurity like crazy. How this is going to change, I don't know. The Wagner Group is in there, as it is in Mali. But the Wagner Group had a catastrophic defeat at the hands of the Tuaregs in Mali, which now makes them very, very vulnerable. The the idea of them being this sort of
elite force.
iron militia group or mercenary group has now changed. They're viewed to be vulnerable. So it's not, and it's not a good thing. So I wanted to bring that up. I wanted to make everybody aware of what's going on there because it doesn't get much news. And I think as people, like, we want to know what's affecting our world. These things all affect our world. These kind of wars and everything goes on, like it shows up in the price of what you pay for anything. And it might, in this case, be minor compared to what is happening in Ukraine, how Ukraine is affecting our prices or how Gaza is affecting our prices.
Yeah.
But this too also does, because it disrupts minerals and the things that whatever Burkina Faso and Mali and Sudan can add to the economy of the world is disruptive. So if you don't really care about those people over there, if you're a heartless person, you might want to care about how it's affecting your bottom line.
An interesting thing is about this. So May 30th this year, Prime Minister Apollinaire Kayalem de Tembela, and I butchered that name, I know, said elections might be delayed given the permanent persistent insecurity affecting the country. Election, how many times have we heard that from dictators before?
And how can you though? Like, no one really can fault. Of course, everybody thinks that he doesn't want any kind of elections, but I don't think a dictator like that's too afraid of elections because they'll just fix them, and if they don't go their way, they'll just do what they want to do anyway.
Yeah,
but I do think that in this particular case, the country is 60%, I think, in the hands of the Islamic insurgents. I think it would be impossible for them to run an election at this particular time. And who's going to come out and vote? Because as soon as they show up at a poll, there might be a bomb or anything else.
I know.
So in this particular case, I would agree with the dictator that it's probably not a good time to have an election. And it's, for one thing, it's probably going to be a senseless election. But on the other hand, it's going to put a lot of people at risk. So I don't think in this particular case, I think the dictator's telling the truth.
Agree. I understand what you're saying, and I tend to agree. There is a tendency, however, to be looking at this as with anything to do with, dictatorships worldwide. They always are saying, "Oh, we can't hold an election right now because," right?
Yes. Yeah. And then when they do, like Maduro in Venezuela, it just fixes it anyway,
Yes. And even if we have an election, I won before the day started.
That's right. I got 93% of the votes. How about that? Well, the election's tomorrow. Good. I can maybe make it 94%.
Or 110% in the case of Robert Mugabe. The other thing about this is, there's two, as you said, there's the Al-Qaeda linked Jama'at Nasir al-Islam wal Muslimin, group for the support of Islam and Muslims, and to a large and to another extent, this Islamic group in Greater Sahara, ISGS. And they've killed hundreds of civilians during attacks across the country. And worse, they're fighting each other.
The Islamic groups will probably fight each other, yes, because
they hate each other. Yeah.
Yes. It's funny how ISIS and Al-Qaeda be fighting each other. They're both extremist insurgents. You think they would ally with one another for the meantime, whatever their objectives are. So they would, and there's the other factor too over in Mali is the Tuaregs. So it's tribal, it's clannish, there's Islamic insurgency. There's the government militias. It is a mess, and I'm like, and the world right now. How much does the world have to offer them relief? How much food can they get in there? How much water can they get in there? How much medical attention can they get in there? What about the children? Can they go to school? All those things that is disrupting the future of that country.
Yeah.
And one of the poorest countries in the world. And
yeah, well, they're saying
really have to. Your heart has to go out to them.
They're saying these groups have besieged more than 24 towns, an estimated 800,000 people, leading to severe food shortages and contributing to malnutrition. So once again, we're going to see in a little while pictures of African babies with pot bellies of starvation on the news.
It says here, the Al Qaeda linked Jamaa Nasser Islam, while Muslim group supported by the Islam and Muslim, and then the group for anyway, I won't go into it, but and to a lesser extent, the Islamic State in the Greater Sahara has killed hundreds of civilians during attacks across the country. Some attacks targeted communities that had formed local civil defense groups. So the people are trying to defend themselves, and those are the ones that are being attacked first. Islamic armed groups also besieged more than two. Now, this seems to be a pattern in the Sahel, from Sudan all the way over to Burkina Faso, from east to west. This idea of surrounding communities and putting them under siege. So they're besieging more than 24 towns, an estimated 800,000 people, leading to severe food shortages and malnutrition. And this is happening. Of course, we know the Jamjouid. Well, they call themselves something different now, but the Jamjouid are doing that in Darfur. The surrounding communities, cutting them off and slowly just burning them out. Sometimes burning them out, sometimes just besieging them. It is a relentless and ugly pattern that's happening throughout the Sahel. Well, we keep focusing on this can be explosive. It's going to be terrible if you can't control this situation. I don't know, but on the other hand, in this case, the Burkina Faso government may have shot themselves in the foot by tossing the French out, because I think the Foreign Legion there, knew what they were doing and were able to keep a lid on, or help keep a lid on, the Islamic insurgencies.
The other thing, of course, about all of this is prices rising, inflation, rising, and many people are unable to buy food staples and other necessities.
Yes.
And it's always the people that pay.
Yeah, it's a terrible thing, and as I said before, we as people of the world should know what is going on and in our world. And unfortunately for us, the press is going to go on. We'll ignore this until there's a huge incident or something like that. That's the trouble with of our press, is it will focus on events that will get them the most attention. They'll do 100 stories on Donald Trump before they do a paragraph on Burkina Faso.
Yeah, exactly. And talking about Donald Trump, interesting that a note that talking about resurging popularity of Vice President Kamala Harris, seemingly forced a series of errors by Donald Trump. And one Republican Party strategist warned it looked like the former president is tanking, tanking his chances of being reelected. Charlotte Observer South Carolina-based Mitt Wiley, wrote a column for the Charlotte Observer. This is South Carolina-based Mitt Wiley wrote that Harris has been giving the former president every chance to derail her fledgling campaign, but he can't seem to stop himself from following his worst instincts.
I wouldn't count Donald Trump out.
No, I would
Donald
not.
Trump is the survivor. I mean, the shoe and Bible salesman really knows how to turn a crowd his way, and the fact that he can do something stupid or do something that anyone else would do would be ridiculous, like sell glittery shoes and Bibles. And it's an advantage to him. Anyone else would do that, they would be laughed off the stage. This guy's a survivor. He's got an infinite amount of endurance. And his biggest problem, however, is the disunity in his followers. There are 3 pending plans for a foreign policy coming out of 3 different people in the Republican Party. Mike Pompeo has got one, and there's 2 other guys that I can't recall the names at the moment. They all 3 have foreign policies which they say are going to be adopted by the Trump administration once it gets in. Well, no. If you are running a campaign properly, you don't have 3 policies from 3 different people. You have it distilled down to 1.
Yeah.
And you put it in the most simplest terms for the people.
Yeah.
What's happening is J.D. Vance is off on his tangent. His Pompeo is off on his tangent. There is a disunity in the campaign. And he's got to bring that back in together if he wants to carry on, particularly with Kamala Harris's momentum.
And Kamala Harris is basically she's 1% up on the polls pretty consistently. Well, she's 3 or 4% up on some polls, and Trump is 3 or 4% up on some polls. But on the poll of polls type thing, she's about 1% up overall. And they tell us she seems to be leading in those swing states right now.
Yeah, but I tell you one thing that might derail a lot of her enthusiasm from her crowd is what the crowd was chanting at her when she, I think, was in Michigan, where it says, "Kamala, Kamala, you can't hide. We won't vote for genocide." Those were people in her own crowd. And she famously says, if you want to vote for Trump, just say so. If you want Trump to win. In other words, she says, yeah, well, I'm not going to change, but your choice is you vote for me or you vote for Trump. So Kamala, you can't hide. We won't vote for genocide. That may derail some of her votes.
Well, and that actually leads on to the next story, her Israel quandary, because they're basically saying there's people here waving Palestinian flags who are saying, Kamala, earn my vote, free Palestine, right?
Yes.
And you get where that is. And at the moment, of course, Biden is setting policy for the country, but she has to set policy for the future.
Hopefully, something will come up in the Democratic convention. However, I think her hands are tied. Israel has too strong of influence in Washington. You can see that Joe Biden is particularly humiliated by Netanyahu every day, and yet he keeps handing him more and more bombs. Biden's hands are tied. He cannot upset the AIPAC, the Israeli lobby, until after if he even has intentions to do it, until after the election. So I have a feeling that if he's got any kind of spine at all, he's going to have to wait to the end of the election in November before Kamala or Trump is put in place, and then come down hard on Israel as best he can, because Israel is out of control right now.
Well, actually, the other thing about this is the president's national security spokesman, John Kirby, put together a carefully worded shot that that avoided criticizing Prime Minister Netanyahu, but yet called out the Israeli finance minister Bezalel Smotrich, for opposing any deal that would trade a hostage release for a ceasefire. And so they're basically firing at this finance minister. But who does Smotrich work for? But Netanyahu.
Well, this is the real problem. Netanyahu cannot stay in power without Smotrich and the other guy. What's his name? Ben Gvir, right? Those guys are extremely terrible Zionists, ultra-violent Zionists who want to expel Palestinians from all the lands in Gaza and the West Bank. And these are the people that Netanyahu needs. He needs them to continue in his, otherwise, if they pull out of this coalition, he's dead in the water. So he's got to keep them satisfied by doing atrocious things like bombing a school and killing 100 people. It's got to the point where the U.S. government doesn't even mention that anymore. Like they used to say, well, we're asking Israel not to bomb children in schools. They don't even mention that anymore because they just ignore everything the United States does. They humiliate Biden at every turn, and they just seem to be loving it. Give me more bombs and shut up, old man. That's what they're doing. Can Kamala change that? I don't think so. I think she's locked into that, and she's saying, "Oh, I won't be silent on this." But I think she's just as spineless as Joe is when it comes to this, because I think she feels the political ramifications would be contrary to her ambitions. And who cares about a bunch of Palestinians over there? Once we kill them all, again, a couple of years, everybody will forget about it.
But again, is Donald Trump going to do any different?
Donald Trump, there's only one thing I like about Donald Trump is he is very nervous about foreign wars.
He is. I know that. He's been very, very nervous about them. He's been very, very nervous about U.S. involvement. And, for example, he did his part in removing U.S. troops from Afghanistan and Iraq.
Yeah, he made the deal to remove the troops from Afghanistan, and Biden blew it. And, and it was a complete schmozzle. The very idea that Trump will do anything different, it is said that of demagogues, they don't like wars because it's something that they can't control, the ramifications of them. So they would rather not have wars. I think when he tried to deal with Russia the way he did was better than Biden has. It may be for the wrong reasons, but the results would have probably turned out better if he dealt with Russia and kind of assured them that there would be no more expansion of NATO into Ukraine and Georgia. Biden didn't do that. He kind of prodded the bear, and the bear bit back.
Yeah, he was very bad on that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and actually, so this is not an easy. It's not an easy thing. And hey, with any politician, you can never win everybody's support anyway, right?
No, and right now whether
you're Harris or Trump, you'll never win everybody's support.
No, but the U.S. administration has to be very, very careful that Netanyahu has wanted the United States to attack Iran way back when it was attacking Iraq. He wanted to go after Iran as well, take them both out. Once you get rid of Saddam Hussein, that was one threat. Bashir al-Assad. Bashir Assad in Syria was another threat. They weren't able to. They caused a civil war there, but they weren't able to get rid of Assad. They were able to get rid of Saddam, but now Netanyahu has wanted them to take out the United States, to spend their money and their blood to take out Iran, and he's made strong arguments for that. And right now, he's sucking the U.S. into it. He's just doing things like assassinating the chief negotiator of the peace plan.
But at the same time, Dave, U.S. involvement in Iraq has been probably one of the most unpopular U.S. incursions since the Vietnam War. Especially when it was proved positive there were no weapons of mass destruction. And so much as we dislike Saddam Hussein, at least he was a leader that you knew what he would do.
Yeah, well, he was thought to be a threat to Israel. That's why Israel we were able to motivate the United States to destroy Iraq effectively. Now Iraq is in three disjointed parts:
but there's
the Kurds, the Shias, and the Sunnis. But right now, Netanyahu has pushed the United States to attack Iran over and over and over again throughout the year.
Yeah, but again, attacking Iran is nothing but a disaster for the U.S.
But they're sucking them into it. They're sucking them into it by making it impossible for the peace plan to go ahead.
Yeah,
and by assassinating people right in Iran. That they've done that a few times. How long is Iran going to put up with that?
All right. Anyway, so Mike says, wait for the debate. Yeah, what debate? We shall see.
Remember, everything's scripted. Kamala has all her scripted. She's the fun thing will be what Trump will come up with and say, because Kamala's stuff is very, very scripted. They have a narrative. They're going to stick with this narrative, and they're not going to go off script. The only guy that's going to go off script is Trump. That might be fun.
Actually, when Trump goes off script, sometimes it is fun. It is fun to watch.
Yeah, sometimes it's very effective.
Yeah, and that's true. I'm not trying to be commentating, supporting any one side. I'm just saying it can be very effective, and he can drive a lot of support that way. Okay, so
you gotta hand it to him. How, the guy is selling shoes and Bibles and running for president. I mean, and nobody's making fun of him for doing that. I mean, not his own side anyway. How do you get away with it? Can you see Kamala out there selling Bibles and? Of course, she's part Indian, so she might want to sell the Bhagavad Gita. I don't know. But shoes or something like that, or her frumpy pantsuits?
Yeah, I don't know. All right. Yeah. Okay, so Food Banks Canada issued a report called Canada Through a Deprivation Lens, right? And this is of particular local importance as Niagara advocates on poverty are looking at a new way to actually measure poverty. And we've been released, they basically released what's called standard market basket measure. And there's two ways of measuring it. Market basket measure or material deprivation index. And the material deprivation index has basically been used in Europe for some time. And though
it's not new. They say it's new, but it's not new.
It's not new. No. It's been used. It's been used in Europe for quite some time. And local advocates are saying we should be looking at this index rather than the market basket measure index.
Yeah, the MBM is the traditional thing that we use here. In other words, they go around and they put stuff into a shopping cart basically and see how much it tallies up and how that compares to the average income of Canadians, and where the problems arise, who can afford it, who can't, who has to put stuff out, take stuff out of the basket and put it back on the shelf, basically. However, Matthew Barker, I guess, is the St. Catharines reporter, says a novel approach to poverty is being examined. It's not novel. It's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
It's just it hasn't been employed in this area.
It just doesn't get used in Canada.
Well, yeah, and around here, I don't know. It might be used in other places in Canada. We just don't know. Like, well, this is pretty much
true. Okay, fair comment. Yeah,
Brock University professors kind of it says, well, they do base it on a family of four in Canada, but it does point out that every different region of Canada is a little bit different. Like in Thunder Bay, you're going to pay a lot more for groceries, but less for housing. And down here, you're going to pay more for housing and less for groceries. Gas will be more expensive there in Thunder Bay, but what it does is it finds elements. It's basically, it's a very similar thing where you of the basket thing, where you take, the market basket measure, you find out how much things cost, pretty much put them in a basket. But this doesn't, all this does is refine that same sense. And it goes into dental work or other things, and it tries to determine who is at risk. And they have, I don't know how many different points was it, different 11 deprivation items common to people struggling. So they look at things like bills, clothing, dental care, transportation, and the protein, and how do you get protein, and then they try to figure out who can afford this. And it might be one thing, a broken car, that could set a whole family back.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely,
because they have to come up with money to. You have a massive dental problem. I remember one of my kids had to have extensive dental care because he fell down and hit his tooth coming off a bike. But this caused a lot of problems. We were very lucky. I had benefits and my wife at the time had benefits. But imagine anyone else. And they got to come up with $3,000 to fix your kid's teeth. And you either don't do it, or you skip rent, or you don't buy the car you need, or you don't.
Well, any of those,
maybe back off on some of the better foods you can buy.
Yeah, any of those issues, at the end of the day, any of those issues are issues that are going to change significantly. People's poverty factor. A person could be in a reasonable job, but if they can't drive to Hamilton tomorrow, they might lose that job.
Yeah, the definition here is just more refined. It's the same idea of the market basket, but the material deprivation index is just a little bit more expanded. It and can apply to regions rather than the whole country or the whole province. So you can go to the region of Thunder Bay, or you can go to the Niagara region, and you can use the index specifically for that area. And it says here that when the MDI, the material deprivation index, is broken down by province, Ontario ranked highest for respondents to unable to afford two of those 11 items or more, at 26 or at 27, well, let's call it 28% of those can't afford two, and 17% for three of the 11 essential items. Basically, those things: transportation, protein, bills. Bills is kind of vague, but you kind of figure, well, it's electricity or whatever else. I don't think, and of course, Christian Freeland would tell these people, cancel the Disney Channel.
Well, I was going to say, okay, so what they're saying here, what then part of this analysis, market basket measure looks more at the inputs, i.e., what you need in order to actually buy that basket, whereas the MDI looks more at the outputs, what you need, what you have to spend.
Yeah, and the last one is unexpected expenses. Everybody has unexpected expenses. The roof is leaking.
Yeah.
You've got a leak in your
the car broke down, right?
Yeah, car broke down is a big one, but plumbing is one. Maybe you need a new furnace. What about a new fridge? What about a new stove? You know what I mean? Those things can really set you back. What if you need a washing machine? Are you going to start hauling your stuff down to the laundromat all the time? Or do you buy the washing machine?
That changes your entire weekend, doesn't it? Being the laundromat.
Yeah, and if you're working, so there's a lot of I suppose I don't see any real solutions coming out of this, except that it more narrowly defines poverty and the ranges of poverty. Poverty is not just poverty. You don't have just the haves. You have the haves with lots of haves, and you have the haves with less haves, but they have. And you have the middle class, which is doing okay, but there are upper middle class and lower middle class. So you know what I mean? You've got the janitor with a full-time job at the school. He's doing okay. And you've got your professional class, engineers, lawyers, so on. But then you got, when you get down to the poverty level, there's ranges of poverty. There are dirt poor people, and there are people that are struggling but getting by their fingertips.
Yeah.
You don't want, maybe this particular index can find ways in which you can see people slipping out of that zone where they're making it and where they're not making it.
That is an important aspect there, Dave. One of the things we're not doing here is how do we push income up, right? How do we manage to get people to be earning better paying jobs?
Well, that's always going to be a struggle.
Yeah, exactly.
Particularly we're not in for the most part, we're not attracting as much industry and investment
absolutely
as we should because of our output. Our production rate is among the lowest in the G7, G20, I think, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
So so that doesn't fare well for outside investment. So you're going to have to find reasons. Why is our production level among the lowest? Why is that? Christian Freeland frustrates herself by trying to figure that out. That's one thing she has pointed out fairly, that our production level is among the worst in.
Because we're not reinvesting in Canadian industry.
You've got to.
I read a report.
You've got to demonstrate to investors that you're going to be able to produce, and if your production level as a country.
One of the things back in. I read a report which was back in like 2013, 2014, when our economy was doing fairly well. And that report basically said one of the biggest problems we had with the Canadian economy is nobody is investing profit back into the Canadian economy.
Well, who did that article?
I forget who it was. I think it was probably somebody like the National Post or the Financial Post or something like that. That's what I read a lot of back then.
Yeah, that was then, though.
10 years ago.
And,
so I'm saying 10 years ago, they were recognizing the fact that we weren't reinvesting in Canada. and it's a big problem.
That's always been a problem, though. I don't know. Productivity problem is like I just brought this back up. Freeland calls Canadian businesses to tackle the urgent productivity challenge. So that is the problem with Canada. Productivity problem going by business court calling on Canadian to investment. So she wants she wants more investment, but she's flying the red flag, saying our productivity level is very low. We got to change that. We got to get that up. We need the productivity level to come up so we can get foreign investment. But I mean that goes away from what we're talking about here right now. You're saying get better jobs. Well, get better jobs is yeah, of course, everybody wants a better job, but
Yeah.
I don't know. How do you get one?
Yeah. How do you bring them in? How do you bring them in?
What you need is more investment in Canada.
Yeah, exactly.
When Canada was running red hot economically, it was because of a lot of foreign investment coming into the country, opening up mines, establishing car plants and stuff like that. They're doing fairly well like that right now in Ontario. I have to tip my hat to Trudeau and Ford for bringing in the electric car companies, and they've also, I think, got a contract with Goodyear for Napanee to produce tires. I think I'm not quite sure about that, but they have drawn in a lot of major producers in the new and upcoming electric car field. However, it's probably not enough because we need more mines opened up. We need more everything. Like it takes 15, 20 years to open a mine, and we have enormous amounts of minerals and stuff that we could sell to the world. And so I don't know that, but that goes without saying because the poverty level is what it is now.
But
and
again,
the material deprivation index is just a better way of tracking what is the problem.
Okay, so the other thing to note in relation to that article that I was talking about, that back in 2013, that corresponds, of course, to the collapses we had with Northern Telecom, Nortel Communications, with BlackBerry, and with other well-known Canadian enterprises.
Well, BlackBerry made a foolish mistake.
Yeah. So did Nortel.
Yeah. So if a company screws up like that, I mean, you and it's not just Canadian companies. Look what happened to Kodak.
I know.
Kodak completely collapsed. It's no longer an entity at all.
But it hurts us.
It made essential mistakes with the market.
It hurts us more because of the fact that we generally have a weaker economy. So when we have a strong player like BlackBerry or like Nortel, it hurts us more when they fail.
I suppose so. But those companies are not going to help these people here that they're talking about in the
I know.
material deprivation index. I mean,
no, that's a long
the general economy will
inflation
like
anyway.
If the economy does improve and there's more job opportunities, obviously it's going to reduce the needs that we see now. But the fact is we have these needs now, and it doesn't look as if those needs are going to change anytime soon.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Anything else? See if we've got any comments on this. Mike says they're all failing. Until they address the control of housing costs, they will continue to fail.
Exactly.
Well, I'm not so sure I agree. You see, I'm not so sure I agree with Mike in this respect. What I believe is we've been running, the housing prices have been going up, and probably too much. I will agree with that. But housing prices remain stagnant in Niagara for quite some time. Right, housing price between the mid 90s to about 2016 was very stagnant. you know, we hardly moved in price at all.
It was normal price. It was normal. It was a normal raise. And if you look at house prices,
there was
they went
hardly
up.
any
They,
raise.
they went up gradually, and they went up in tandem with the uh, with the economy. So it went up like this. So grocery prices, car prices, as they went up, the housing prices went along the same track. All of a
Not in
sudden, the
Niagara.
housing
Not in
splits
not
from
in
that
Niagara.
and explodes.
Not in Niagara.
Well, maybe, but I mean, I think you're splitting hairs here right now. Right now,
Yeah.
we have a housing a problem, a big one,
We do have a
and the
housing
average
problem, yeah.
person does not
But
have the
you see,
ability
we
to buy
also
a
have
house.
we
I had
also
3 by the time I was my son's age, and none of my
yeah.
sons have a house.
Okay, we do have a housing problem. I agree 100%. Whether you're renting or buying, we have a housing problem. But we have a bigger problem insofar as the wages that are paid today are well under what the wages that you were paid back in your day.
They
Or
are
the modern
the wages have
equivalent
gone
thereof.
up. The wages have gone up on a sliding scale like this. What hasn't gone up compared to wages is housing. Housing is the big difference. Housing is the hugest difference of all. Like it went exploded. You know, when the average person could buy a house in 2015, they cannot buy it now. And that same average person who has works at, even people who work in GM or those places that pay very well, are cannot buy houses the same way that their fathers and their grandfathers could, basically, their parents and their grandparents. So that housing is the factor in there that has really struck home here. I mean, you could talk inflation comes and goes and all that other stuff, but it is the real killer is housing and how long it has taken to stabilize that. So I agree with Mike. Housing is the number one factor. If they can bring that down, if housing can become more reasonable for the average middle class person, you would find a lot of relief going through the economy. I believe that you would have a lot happier people too, and the fact that people can't afford houses is the number one reason I think that Trudeau's going to lose, and I have a feeling that his 9/11 might not be 9/11 like I predicted, but I think he's going to follow Biden and drop out for the better of his party.
Yeah. Okay. So Justin Trudeau's Liberals were blamed for spiking inflation on global factor. Blamed spiking inflation on global factors, but now are taking credit for its slowdown.
Of course, and we predicted this. I remember making jokes about this. That we can't do nothing about it. You know, it's the global inflation thing. Can't do anything about it.
We put it under control. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, we can't put out that fire. I'm sorry, but now suddenly things have turned, and the world economy is kind of less inflation throughout the world. But now they're taking responsibility for it. Aha! Look what we've done. We've brought down inflation. Aren't we good?
Yeah.
And then somebody says, "Well, I thought you said you weren't responsible for it. It was a world." Well, no, not anymore. It's not a world thing now. It's just a Canadian thing, and we fixed it.
Yeah, but hey, which government in the last 50 years hasn't used that excuse and rebounded with, hey, weren't we great when they fixed it, right? Or didn't fix it?
Well, exactly. And this is typical of every government, of course. It's just like every government comes in and they're going to give you tax relief. But when they get in, they say, oh, my goodness, the books are so bad. We didn't realize how bad things were. So we can't give you any more tax relief. Yeah. Stuff like that. And it's a typical gab. I mean, it is so blatant, though. That's what gets me here. They have gone over the top, saying that, there's we're fighting, like the whole world is fighting this massive inflation, and we just caught in this storm. There's nothing much we can do. We have to wait for the storm of inflation to come down worldwide. And then when things do start to get a little bit better, well, we are totally responsible for Canada's new economic resurgence and the reduction of inflation. We did that.
Okay, so here's the question then. So when are you going to influence the Bank of Canada to put the interest rate down?
Yeah, seriously, they don't even touch that. They don't.
Yeah, I know.
Bank of Canada makes its moves on its own, and they don't say, "Well, put the interest rates down." No, they don't. So no, it's just the total gab.
I know.
I think. I mean, it's silly. I am surprised that the Star wrote the article, though. Now what they did do is they filled it up with all kinds of stuff. Well, this is what the government did do, and this is what the government did do, and the government didn't make it worse. They could have made it worse. They didn't. They weren't. The global. They said, well, the global inflation thing was the problem, and not the Canadian government. But the only thing the Canadian government could take credit for is not making the problem worse. So they're still filling up, still bolstering the government by making it sound as if they're laughing at the government for its claims of reducing inflation. Yeah. But the whole article really is a prop up of the Liberal government. So if you read the whole article, the Star is very careful not to praise Justin Trudeau or
of course.
They just call a spade for a while, and then they go into, well, they really did a really good job of not making things worse. They did a really good job doing this and this and this. It could have been a lot worse, so on and so forth. So they're clever in the way they do it. They couldn't praise the government because nobody's going to buy it, and so they do make a little bit of fun of the government. But most of the article is in support of the government.
Oh, of course. Well, where does it come from? The Star,
the Red Star.
Yeah, okay. So they are saying, there's been a large increase, a downdraft in inflation because of many international factors as well.
Everything's international, and of course, we're tied to the world economy.
Of course.
The problem we had was we had a huge debt prior to COVID. Yeah, and this was, and if we didn't have such a high debt prior to COVID, we would have been able to be in a better place where we are now. That's been the warning over and over and over again. But every government, and I don't really fault the Trudeau government because they're just like every other government.
Oh, absolutely.
They'll overborrow and they'll ignore the debt. When somebody says, look, if you have a real emergency and you've got all this debt, you're going to have a hard time fighting your way out. So we did have COVID. We did have a real emergency. And what did the government do for the 5 or 6 years before COVID was to increase the Canadian debt 3 or 4 times that it was under Harper, which made it very hard for us to crawl out of this now. I think we have to pay 14 cents or.
Well, that is actually what set the Canadian economy on a worst case scenario, because if we hadn't have had that pre-existing debt by the time we went into our into this inflation period of inflation, we'd have been better capable of surviving it.
Well, look, I just got back from Portugal. The Canadian dollar is hopelessly bad. I mean, seriously, Like it's like worth about 70 cents on the US dollar. It's about worth 60 something cents on against the euro. It is pathetic. Pathetic. The buying power of the Canadian dollar is just really bad. And that you can blame a lot of that on the government, because what has the government done is the government has printed money, is it devalued its own currency by flooding the country with more money. And that's not sustainable. It's quantitative easing, and it just doesn't work for the long term. And the consequences of that are out there. So the Canadian dollar is worth zero almost. The only thing the Canadian dollar at this particular low level, the only advantage it would have is exports. So when we produce, iron ore or something, ours is going to be cheaper, because they're buying it in Canadian dollars. So that's about the only advantage Canada has. But it is the Canadian dollar is way lower than it should be, and that productivity level, which I spoke of before, that's freaking out Chrystia Freeland, is the thing that's going to keep that dollar down.
Yeah. At the moment, it's all about productivity levels.
You can't encourage as much investment as you want. If you do that, then the dollar will go up because your productivity will go up and you'll get more investment. But our productivity is ultra low, and I like to know what the Liberal government, what reason they think that is. They'll probably say it's somebody else's fault. If the productivity level goes up, they'll take credit for it. But if the productivity level continues to be bad and go down, it'll be somebody else's problem. It'll be the world. Can't do anything about it.
Productivity is actually one of the most important factors, economic factors we have in any economy.
And our productivity level is pathetic, apparently, according to the G7 or even G20, like I said. So those are the factors that will probably stifle the economy going forward. I don't think the Conservatives will be able to fix that if they get into government.
All right.
They'd have to have a good look at it. I don't know what they would do about it.
Yeah, I got to get going anyway because I got a hearing this morning.
Okay.
All right. So
if you've got a hearing, somebody else has a listening.
That's one way of looking at it.
Okay. Without further ado, I bid you adieu. Thanks for joining in, everyone.
Yeah. Have a great day.